Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another album of the week. This is episode number 97. So, if you hadn't seen episode number 12 of the Nasty Metal podcast, I pretty much announced what was going to be this week's album pick, at least for this episode. But if you hadn't, and since I'd kind of hinted at this, and once again, I accidentally said February 6th instead of February 9th. But since tomorrow is February 9th, that means this album is reaching its 40th anniversary, and today I am going to be talking about it, and it will be celebrated on this channel. It is the third full-length album from pretty much, I don't know if you can say cult at this point. Instead, they are at this point legendary now. Definitely one of the pretty much considered a classic heavy metal record, but again, it's the third album from Riot. It's Fire Down Under. Again, originally released on February 9th, 1981, through, of course, Elektra Records. Oh boy. This is, again, while the artwork, many people definitely always slagged Riot in some cases for some of the artwork, especially their mascot, which was basically a seal, or at least was it, yeah, a seal or so, basically stuck on some human body that's either colored purple, since the very first album, Rock City, which was released in 1977. Of course, back in 2019, I did, of course, spotlighted Narita, which was the album that came before. Again, let's definitely go back to that one. Since after releasing Narita, since that was also the final album for Capitol, because for Capitol Records, apparently again the deal just went south. Again, Riot had terrible luck with getting record labels. Obviously, they tried to get with Capitol plenty of times, but because of they just didn't think that they were good enough, that's when they decided to record Narita, and then they thought, all right, yeah, you're now good enough. But the only reason apparently they only signed Riot in the first place was so they can have a band to open up for Sammy Hagar. So that just, and it seemed only, again, it just seemed to be more of a pity deal, I guess you could say, than really a legitimate record deal. So after that, after Narita and doing the tours, eventually they just were, they apparently that they were going to stick with the label, because again, they were working on Fire Down Under anyways, especially in, again, this was supposed to have been released on Capitol. Again, they went into the studio in New York City called Green Street Recordings, Inc., and again, from like November to December of 1980, they were recording this album. So when they finally had finished it, I mean, they had recorded close to like 14 to 13 songs, but the songs that apparently Capitol wanted, they didn't want a very heavy sounding record. They wanted more of a commercial sounding album. Again, very kind of close to more of the commercial stuff, again, with Sammy Hagar. I guess basically Sammy Hagar was Capitol Records' house artist. So they wanted something very akin to that, and they just weren't going to go for it. So that's why they decided to no longer stay on Capitol. They pretty much turned down the deal, and instead, that's when Elektra stepped in and picked up the record, and that's how Riot was able to release the album that they wanted to release. And of course, eventually, some of those songs that Capitol wanted on the album eventually would end up getting used as bonus tracks, which I'll get to that version of Fire Down Under here. But eventually, they finally were able to release the album that they wanted through Elektra, again, on February 9th, 1981. Again, also producing still is Steve Loeb, who has been, both Billy Arnell and Steve Loeb. Still the I guess in many ways it became Riot's sole producing team since Rock City from 1977. So this is where I guess we now lead into the actual album. So Fire Down Under. This album, of course, consists of 10 songs, and it all clocks in at 37 minutes and 35 seconds. So these 10 songs are, my God, just look at the track listing here. I mean, goddamn. I mean, it opens up with Swords and Tequila, which is definitely one of the most classic ways you can open up an album. And then, of course, kicking it with second here is the title track, Feel the Same, Outlaw, Don't Bring Me Down, Don't Hold Back, Altar of the King, No Lies, Run for Your Life, and then finally Flashbacks, which I'll touch on a bit of flashbacks. But there's your 10 songs, and Swords and Tequila, one of them, it may be considered one of the most ripped off riffs in hard rock and heavy metal, but you can't say that the riff isn't infectious, because goddamn, it's one of the most infectious riffs you can ever hear. And again, it's also, you can say it's kind of an earworm song, because it sticks to your brain like glue. Again, you can even just end up repeating the chorus during the day or even at night, especially even when you're sleeping or dreaming. You will pretty much would be humming or singing a bit, or just thinking of the chorus for Swords and Tequila. Just a classic track, and it's a good way to open up the album. Again, Fire Down Under, my God, just fast and loose. Again, just hold no punches. It's a great track in its own right. Definitely consider at times some of the early speed metal tracks, again with like Run for Your Life, Feel the Same, just more classic stuff, Outlaw. Again, this kind of almost can be seen as like a signature Riot track too, and also for Mark Reality. Again, it's just, again up there with Swords and Tequila, as it's another signature track, to where it was so signature that on the Unleashed the Fire album, which was pretty much was a tribute to Mark Reality, they did Return of the Outlaw, which basically was like a continuation of this track, but it was seen as more of, again, as a heartwarming tribute to Mark Reality. So that shows you just the earthness, or whatever you can say, for Outlaw. Just a great track. Don't Bring Me Down is, again, another fun rocker that I also dig. And I also forgot to touch on Feel the Same, which is kind of a moody kind of track. Almost has a bit of an Aerosmith vibe to this track, actually. It wouldn't be too far out of place on, like, Toys in the Attic, or even at times maybe even Rocks, because it just has kind of a really, just a very moody feel, but it's slow, but it just has, again, a nice groove to it, and it's a great track. But Don't Bring Me Down is another great song, again, very upbeat, but it's a good track. I have nothing bad to say about it. Don't Hold Back to being more of a classic heavy rocker, and so in the vein of like UFO and Scorpions or Michael Schenker Group. It's in that kind of vein. It's just a good track. Of course, you might even find some similarities to even Achilles' Last Stand from Led Zeppelin. It's just kind of that same vein in terms of like the pacing and the composition. It's the similar tempo, and a little bit of similar vein of, like, again, like Lights Out, again, or Love Drive. It's just that similar vein, so it's a good track. Altar of the King, again, could make some other comparisons to UFO, especially the way it starts off, which, again, very, very medieval-like, with its a clean guitar entry before it goes into the riff. So really, it can be similar to Dr. Doctor from UFO, but there's a little bit of, at times, a very Blackmore-ish feel to it. Again, it wouldn't be too far off of maybe the very first Rainbow album, again, Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, or Riot, or Rainbow Rising. It's that kind of feel, so fits perfectly there. But again, Guy Speranza, though, while he's definitely a different kind of, he's more false, very high in terms of very clean vocals in his right. Very much not the sort of almost bluesy feel of, for example, of Ronnie James Dio. But again, I think Guy Speranza, I think, fits perfect for this kind of song. So it's just good. No Lies, again. This one, I don't know if you can say is a ballad, but it's just a very melodic track, and this one almost could have been a big hit for them too, if you think about it, because of I'm actually surprised that they didn't want that Capitol kind of refused to release the version that Riot wanted for this album because of it's already a very melodic record in its own right, and it still has a very commercial touch to it. Again, radio, that some of these songs could have been radio hits on their own. It's really surprising that they refused and acted the way that they did, which makes you wonder on whether or not if Capitol really just didn't like Riot to begin with, and they only just did it out of pity. So I just think it's very odd. So, just a great track though, again, no lies. Finally, Run For Your Life. This is pretty much one of the actual legitimate final songs on the album, because, again, just like with Fired On Under, this track is a rip-roaring track. This is actually one of the first Guy Speranza-era Riot songs I ever heard, alongside maybe Swords and Tequila. Because when I was, I definitely should start now getting into some of my personal stories, how I got into Riot. The first time I actually heard of Riot, and again in the first place, was because of Thundersteel. I heard the track and I saw the artwork. While the artwork was kind of cheesy, there was something appealing about it. But again, I liked it. Again, I discovered them when they were a little bit on the more real straight up, almost Judas Priest speed metal feel. I kind of discovered them in that kind of period. But again, going backwards and seeing the stuff like Born America and Narita and Fired On Under and Restless Breed and those albums, I was very curious. So one of the songs I ended up checking out as well was Run For Your Life. And this song just, again, in many ways, I actually kind of it ripped my face off because of it, especially as a young kid. Or at least I was kind of, I was in my little early teens at the point when I heard this back in like 2009 and on YouTube. And I'm like, oh God, yes, this is it. And again, for 1981, this another rip-roaring speed metal track. Was very aggressive. Again, almost at times you can say, again, being one of the early inspirations for the thrash metal stuff. Again, this song, along with whatever Diamond Head put out, again, Lightning to the Nations, or those kind of stuff, or even Tigers of Pantang releasing songs like Gangland on Spellbound. And then, of course, you even have what Breaker from Accept. You know, you have some of these real fast, heavy songs, but this one, while it has more of a rock and roll feel, it also does fit in with the new wave of British heavy metal movement and what those bands are doing. Because, again, it's a very rip-roaring, no BS style speed rocker that, again, is very metallic sounding. And it's just a great song. One of my personal favorites, so Run For Your Life. Finally, let's get to track number 10, which is the final song that pretty much ends the album. It's Flashbacks. This one's interesting. This is basically an entire almost guitar instrumental, guitar solo, basically. I think it was recorded in the studio. I don't know, that this could have been also used one of the guitar solos I might have recorded from like a soundboard recording, maybe one of the live shows. But again, they eventually, I think they did fix or finish some of it in the studio. But the thing is, there's a lot of audio samples through most of this, and it's like basically almost, in many ways, it's basically almost a pure, oh God, like almost a biography in a song. If I can sum it up that way. Actually, I am summing up that way. It's like almost of a audio biography, but in a song, but done with sound clips, because of you got sound clips where it's from radio stations, whatever, interviews, either people talking about it. I mean, there's even some samples from when they might have, I think, opened up at the Monsters of Rock in 1980. And then, again, or even Donington, you've got some of the clips from there. You think, again, the radio interviews, or at least people were talking about the album. You got one person who's basically one of the most infamous pieces from here, because of this interviewer or whoever's talking in the fucking radio. He's basically kind of pretty much going on and saying how Riot were almost quote-unquote punk rock. This, again, there was a point in time where, because since the definition of heavy metal wasn't quite defined yet, even though you had magazines that were using the term, there were still some people that were still kind of on the fence on which bands were still considered metal. You still have people considering bands like AC/DC and then Riot here as like punk rock at one point. So it was almost becoming a bit of a very blurred in terms of what was being considered metal. Many people were coining bands different things, and it ended up going into the 1980s because of, even though Metallica gets considered one of the first thrash metal bands, but when they came out and they released records like either Kill 'Em All or especially with Ride the Lightning, they kind of started to be considered as power metal. Anthrax was the first band that got coined that was ever considered thrash metal from Fistful of Metal, which came out the same year as Ride the Lightning. So really, people were unsure what to label certain bands, because again, they mostly, again, people were using genres tags as a way to kind of summing up a band's sound, instead of really, this band is really this. Instead, it was just a way to describe the sound of the record. So, but in terms of Riot, because since how fast and loose this band was, they kind of got tagged as a punk rock band at one point. So that's why I think they chose the piece, because I think, again, it was as more of a little humorous in a way. So that's why they probably chose that. But again, you got plenty of periodic pieces thrown in this track. So, but the thing is, I do enjoy the track. It's very fun. It's actually, again, it's a very fun listen, and it almost seems like a very sentimental way to actually end the album. Of course, since in a way, this also is kind of seen as a way to even end the era for Riot, especially for Guy Speranza. So this is where finally we then get to the ending of Fire Down Under, because again, after Fire Down Under gets released, they do their shows, they do the little tour to basically to support this album. Then after that, Guy Speranza will then eventually leave the band. I don't know if he was fired, but he left the band, and then eventually he would get replaced with Rhett Forrester, and that story will continue whenever I do Restless Breed. And it won't be this year, probably definitely be next year, close to its anniversary. So that kind of ends this story, this chapter in Riot. Fire Down Under pretty much caps the end for the Guy Speranza era of Riot. It caps the end of the early era when they were young and hungry. So it really kind of, it pretty much definitely caps the end to that. As far as for the album itself, before I really get into the pretty much the sad tale for Guy Speranza, I definitely do have to also talk about for sure Fire Down Under, because I kind of elaborate on the fact that the bonus tracks, or the songs that were left off the album that Capitol wanted on Fire Down Under to begin with, those songs eventually would get used as bonus tracks for the 1997 reissue of Fire Down Under. But the thing is, why I also want to talk about, or briefly talk about, this version of Fire Down Under that the German label High Voltage Records released, is that Steve Loeb, sometime in the 90s or so, he decided to remix the album. Yeah, on the remix version, it just it's a little beefed up, basically. It's been beefed up. There's more, the channels even at times have been kind of switched around. So some song, it just has more of a beefier tone to the album compared to the original mix, which the original mix was a little bit on the trebly thin side, whereas again, the Steve Loeb remix was on the more almost very bassy, more beefier side. It definitely has been, again, the sound has been beefed up a little bit. Though I kind of prefer the original mix, just because of, again, I've been so used to the original mix to begin with. So it's still cool, nonetheless, it's still cool. But the bonus tracks, though, that were left over that didn't make the actual album were Struck by Lightning, Misty Morning Rain, You're All I Need Tonight, and One Step Closer. Within there's a song called Hot Life, which I don't think was ever from the original sessions. It sounds, I think it was left over from the Born in America sessions, but they shortened it for here. So I think a longer version has been released, I think, on one of the High Roller Records volume compilations that pretty much span through most of the decades of Riot. So very interesting. So that pretty much ends Fight On Under there. As for Guy Speranza, in 2003 of November 8, Guy Speranza would eventually end up passing away due to his dealings with pancreatic cancer. So that sadly ended his chapter. So there was never going to be, sadly, a reunion with the original lineup of Riot, or at least the era for like Fight On Under and Narita. So it's pretty sad. Again, one of the best. Obviously, he had a very great voice for what he had. He definitely very smooth in some places, very electric. Again, he just had a great voice for that sort of also at times even radio rock or so. He had a very good voice for what he had, and it actually fit the attitude of some of these early Riot albums. He was a very great vocalist. I guess in some cases he was probably the band's Bon Scott. So he just added a little bit of character as well to the band, besides Mark Raleigh adding his very great guitar playing too. That was explosive in its own right. So just a great vocalist. And again, just a bit of a sad way to kind of die on. Again, he was only 47 years old when he passed away. So very, very much a sad way. So that's where we end things. Fight On Under, reaching 40 years old on February 9th here this year. Just a great album all around. If you have any memories of growing up with this album, leave them in the comment section below. But if you don't have, if you've never heard this album, obviously I think you definitely should listen to this album. I think it's definitely worth checking out. You probably should not be listening to this at this point, or at least to my thoughts on this. Instead, just go and listen to it. But still, for any of those who obviously has never heard Riot to begin with, this is one of those albums where if you want to really get a good taste of the early era of Riot, again, either this or Narita are just great listens. I might give the edge to Narita because of that album. I've got more of a, for sure, a connection with. I got more of a personal bond with that album, but Fight On Under is easily next to Narita, as there is one of the best of the first three Riot albums. So pretty much for me, it'll go from, again, Narita, Fight On Under, and then finally Rock City. If I were to rate, again, the first three Riot albums, that would be my order there, but I know many people will definitely have a different ranking order. But obviously, Narita and Fight On Under are just close to each other. They're just, again, the definitions of just that sort of early metal, hard, or at times that hard rock sound. They really definitely, or that new wave or British heavy metal era. Even though Riot were from New York City, again here in the United States, they again kind of fit in with the bands in Britain that were just churning out that heavy rockin' shit from there. So just good stuff. Again, just a classic album. So with that, next week, it will be, of course, the album of the week for, well, an album that might be considered not the best from the band. But again, I've got some personal relationship with that album. Just like how I got most of these albums that I've got personal relationships with. I grew up as much listening to them. Even though if I may be younger, still, I listen to a lot of these albums a lot. Again, just classic stuff. So with that, hope all of you enjoyed. This is Every Threshold saying I am out. And I'll see y'all later. Take care, everyone.